Since I started university, I took a geography course to learn the date lines and maybe use a sextant. But now I just press facsimiles, and you're exactly who you wanted to be. Well, that's what you said, 'cause you wanna watch TV and sleep all day and lay in bed, but you're forgetting that I've got to go to work and eat my food and pay my rent and reproduce, then feed those kids and maybe use a sextant. I don't miss you, I miss the thought of what we were. 'Cause this is the part where I shut up and let you infest my brain, wrap your arms around my cortex, kick you in and let you drain. You'll never get rid of me. Oh, I'm like a fucking disease. I'll make a home in your gut, 'cause it's somewhere warm to sleep. And what was your thought when you realized you'll never feel naive love again? Was it pain or was it sickness? Were you proud of who you've been? The shine is waiting for his phone calls, replaced by apathy and dating apps. You held his hand, it felt like flying. Now he's just another man. You'd rather he was inside than beside you. But he's talking marriage and a future. He's picking a lock he doesn't go into. His knife in a wound, he's a suture. I don't miss you, I miss the thought of what we were. 'Cause this is the part where I shut up and let you infest my brain, wrap your arms around my cortex, kick you in and let you drain. You'll never get rid of me. Oh, I'm
Hi chat, how are we doing today? I did not think I was going to stream today, but I was like, I've gotten a good portion of my homework done, all the homework done that I needed to get done today, and the recital that I had to go to as like part of my major ended a lot faster than I thought it would for some reason. I don't know why I thought it would last like 3 fucking hours, but so I was like, you know what? I'm gonna stream because I want to read the next chapter of The Stars and Their Children like now. And so I did. And so I am. Also, I'm a bit exhausted, but like I can get through a stream. If I randomly pass out in the middle of stream, it is what it is. I'm not going to. I'm not that tired. And I have some tea with me. So that should be enough caffeine to not make me hyper, but enough to get me through the stream at least. Alright. Boop. Here we go. Apparently this is where things really start to kick off, according to the notes in the last chapter. Alright. Again, the Stars and Their Children is written by Bones and the Bees. Be sure to give her some support on AO3, because she's just an amazing fucking writer. Like, goddamn. Alright. Chapter 19. When the Pillar Finally Breaks. Summary. Wilbur learns something disturbing, and everything begins to unravel. Oh, I can't wait! Any... I didn't mention this last chapter since Rambu didn't make an appearance in it, but I'm aware that Rambu has recently come out as non-binary and uses he/they pronouns. However, I started this fic before they came out. I've only been using he/him for Rambu for consistency's sake. Whenever I write someone who uses multiple pronouns, I tend to just choose one to use for the story and stick with it. Therefore, I'm just going to keep using he/him for Rambu throughout this fic. I just want to let you guys know I'm not purposefully ignoring the fact that he uses he/they now or anything. Okay, cool. Figured that was important for me to read out. The library was no longer Wilbur's place of refuge, but he kept going there anyway. He told himself it was out of spite. Just because Technoblade now seemed to always be in the library every time Wilbur wanted to go there, didn't mean he was going to avoid it. He didn't want to give Technoblade that satisfaction. To let him know that his presence bothered Wilbur that much. But the truth was that Wilbur actually didn't mind spending time in the library with Technoblade. Not like he used to, anyway. Ever since that night when Technoblade carried him back from Quackity's when he was drunk off his ass, the two had found a sort of strenuous truce with each other. It wasn't as if they were friends or anything. Not like Technoblade and Tommy. But the tension that used to choke the air between them whenever they found themselves alone together was quickly fading. Not friends, but not enemies either. Wilbur could make peace with neutrality. Which was how he found himself in the library one afternoon, comfortably reading a book on his lap while Technoblade sat a few chairs away from him, doing the same. The two were silent as they read, each one content to focus on their own pages. Before, Wilbur wouldn't have been able to concentrate on the words in front of him with Technoblade in the room. But now something had shifted, and Wilbur had learned how to do just that. His eyes skimmed over the page of facts about Floslium's government. The book was one he had picked up at random. While he would have liked to learn more about Zephyr's Force history now that he'd been told, I would assume, about the Antarctic Empire's humble beginnings, he also understood why there were no history books on the subject yet. It was far too new. So, until a book was written, his only source of information on the planet was going to be from Philza himself. For the time being, though, he could keep himself busy reading about Floslium. Except right when he was about to swipe to the next page to read about the First Forest War. You know, we can't keep doing this forever. Technoblade's gruff voice sliced through the silence with a jolt, sending an electric current down Wilbur's spine. "What?" he asked, glancing up from the holopad. The Imperator, who had set his own holopad off to the side now, folded his hands in front of him and shrugged. "Phil won't tell you this, but we don't want to let Asempi get its claws too deeply embedded in Eldingvegger. It's been months now, and sooner or later, we're gonna have to make our move on the planet." And just like that, the strange peace Wilbur had found with Technoblade shattered to the ground. "Why wouldn't Philza tell me that?" Wilbur asked, his heart pounding in his chest. "Because he's worried about pushing you too fast," Technoblade explained, folding his hands in front of him. "But Orpheus, I think you need to know that we're not going to sit back forever." It was like a bucket of ice water had been dumped on his head. Wilbur clenched his teeth, jaw aching as he struggled to control his face. Fuck. Of course they weren't going to wait forever, he knew that. But with everything else going on, both with Tommy and the torrential emotions playing out a war inside of him, Wilbur had let it fall to the back of his mind. Not the situation. He could never forget about the situation. But the immediacy of it all. He'd let his guard down ever so briefly, and now he'd just been slapped in the face for it. "Philza is the one who decided to postpone the negotiations, not us," Wilbur pointed out. "If he wants to go back into it, we certainly can. We're just waiting on him." Technoblade huffed, shaking his head. "Kinda interesting that you say we. When was the last time you talked to Tommy about any of this stuff?" Wilbur had to fight not to flinch. "We've been busy with other things, but we still talk about it." "They don't talk about it. They don't talk about much of anything these days." "You're lying," Technoblade said, his voice flat. "I'm not," Wilbur shot back, his heart leaping into his throat. "You are. And I know you are because if you weren't, Tommy would have told you that he and I started talking about the negotiations again." The words were casual, an acquaintance sharing some news. Nothing sinister sat behind Technoblade's voice. There was no malice or taunting. It was a simple fact and nothing more. And yet, those words were like a guillotine, falling right into the center of Wilbur's skull. "What?" "It wasn't a formal meeting or anything, but we talked a bit about it and where things might go," Technoblade told him, feigning obliviousness to the turmoil Wilbur was going through. Tommy talked to Technoblade about the negotiations. Tommy talked politics with the Imperator. And he hadn't told Wilbur. Hadn't mentioned a single thing about it to him. What did he... Nothing's been solidified yet, but we discussed possible terms for Eldingvegger to join the Antarctic Empire, since Tommy seems to be in favor of that now. No, that can't be true," Tommy wouldn't do that. He wouldn't give up like that. Especially not without saying a word of it to Wilbur first. He wouldn't. Why are you telling me this? Wilbur demanded, jumping to his feet. Technoblade raised a single pink eyebrow at him, his golden eyes unreadable behind his glasses. Because you and Tommy aren't talking anymore, and it's causing problems for the rest of us. Whether you like it or not, we gotta move forward with things. And I'm tired of waiting for you and Phil to finish your whole song and dance. You're lying, Wilbur spat, panic clawing the back of his throat. If you think I'm lying, go ask Tommy about it. See if he tells you the truth, Technoblade said, leaning back in his seat. Wilbur stood there, feet frozen to the floor as ice crawled up his spine. Technoblade could be lying. He might just be trying to start an argument between them. But why would he do that? Wilbur had already drunkenly whined about how bad things were between him and his brother to Technoblade already, so he knew they weren't on good terms. Why would he feel a need to split them up further? But at the same time, Wilbur didn't even want to consider the idea that he could be telling the truth. Because if he was, that meant that his fears weren't just the result of his paranoid mind. It meant that Tommy really didn't trust him anymore. Didn't look to him for guidance. Didn't need him. Filza had told him that maybe Wilbur just didn't know what Tommy needed. That maybe Wilbur was already enough. Or that he at least had the potential to be. If what Technoblade said was true, though, that meant Tommy had given up on him. The ice continued to creep its way up his spine and around his chest. It covered his ribs and swallowed his heart, sending stabbing pains through his entire body. He couldn't move, and he couldn't breathe. His worst nightmare was coming true. Orpheus? Technoblade asked after a moment, when Wilbur hadn't made a move to leave. You okay? There was concern in his voice. The flat, empty tone from before was gone. Now Technoblade's concern laced itself around his words, thawing some of the ice that was piercing through the fatty tissue and muscles of his heart. He took a ragged breath and felt more of the ice crack around his lungs. I'm fine, he lied, his voice trembling as he stumbled back. I need to go. Immediately, Technoblade frowned and pushed to his feet. Orpheus. Before he could say anything else, though, Wilbur broke the frost encasing his limbs and turned on his heel to hurry out of the library. He ignored Technoblade calling his name behind him, because he couldn't handle speaking to him right now. Not after what he just told Wilbur. Jack jumped when Wilbur practically burst from the library, brows furrowing as he took in Wilbur's wide eyes and heavy breathing. Will, what's wrong? Jack asked, rushing to his side. I can't tell you, Wilbur gasped, fighting to fill his lungs. Shit, I can't fucking do this. He wasn't making sense, but he couldn't explain what was going on to Jack. He just couldn't. Even if he trusted Jack, he wasn't sure if he could get his mouth to form the words right now. Somehow, Jack understood this without Wilbur needing to tell him. Outside? He asked after a beat, squaring his shoulders like he was preparing for battle. The thing was, Wilbur needed to talk to Tommy. He needed to find out where he was and speak to him as soon as possible. But at the same time, he wasn't even sure if he'd be able to make it to their room without passing out from hyperventilating. He needed everything to shut off for just a moment. He had to quiet his head enough so he could hear his own thoughts over the roaring waves. Please, he gasped out. One second. That was all he had to say. Without a second of hesitation, Jack grabbed his wrist and started guiding him down the hall and towards the staircase. Wilbur's breaths were stuttered, but he tried to focus on the warm fingers wrapping around his arm and not the deafening roar echoing in his ears. Before they could even get to the stairs, though, Wilbur found himself running directly into the last person he wanted to see. "Oh, Orpheus, I'm sorry, I didn't..." Rambu cut himself off when he noticed Jack grabbing his wrist, before his eyes then flickered back to Wilbur's face. "Wait, are you okay?" Yes, he wanted to snap. Leave me be. Except the panic wrapping itself around Wilbur's throat and cutting off his air disappeared the moment he locked onto Rambu's two-toned face. Because Rambu was Tommy's closest confidant these days. He'd practically told Wilbur as much himself. And Rambu was Technoblade's protege. If anyone knew what was going on with Tommy, it would be the Endurian standing right in front of him. "Did you know?" Wilbur demanded, taking a step towards Rambu. Rambu blinked, clearly confused. Did I know what?" "Oh, don't play fucking dumb with me, Rambu," Wilbur snarled, curling his hands into fists. "Did you know that Tommy and Technoblade were talking about Eldingvega joining the Empire?" Behind him, Wilbur heard Jack muttering, "Oh fuck." Meanwhile, Rambu's eyes widened. "No! I didn't even know he and Techno had opened up I didn't even know he and Techno had opened up the negotiations again," Rambu stammered, holding his arms close to his chest. Wilbur frowned. His gut wasn't reliable anymore. He knew that. But still, there was something deep inside of him telling that Rambu was lying to him. That despite the waver in his voice and the genuine concern in his eyes, he was a liar. "That's fucking bullshit," Wilbur snapped. "You're Techno's protege, and one of Tommy's closest friends. There's no way you didn't hear something from either one of them." Rambu shook his head, his black and white hair falling over his face. We don't talk about that stuff most of the time." "Oh really? You don't? Not even when Tommy's pissed at me? He doesn't rant and rave about how fucked up our whole situation is?" There was a beat as Rambu shrunk back, gaze dropping to the floor. He curled in on himself, and a rock dropped into the pit of Wilbur's stomach. "I'm onto you, Rambu," Wilbur hissed, narrowing his eyes. "You're always sticking your nose where it doesn't belong, and I know why that is. You might have Tommy fooled, but I'm not an idiot." "Orpheus, I don't know what you're talking about. Tommy's my friend, and I thought..." He cut himself off, slamming his mouth shut like he was worried he'd said too much. Wilbur took another step closer to him. "And you thought what, Rambu?" Letting out a shaky breath, Rambu dropped his arms from his chest. "I thought we could be friends too, Orpheus. I get worried about you just like I get worried about Tommy." For a moment, Wilbur's chest seized at that. Because despite being horrible to Rambu ever since he got here, now he was telling Wilbur that all he wanted was to be his friend. That for some godforsaken reason, Rambu gave a shit about Wilbur when Wilbur had never given a shit about him. But then the seizing stopped. Wilbur took a deep breath and flashed Rambu the coldest look he could muster. "That's how I know you're a liar, because we were never anything close to friends." Rambu flinched, and something like guilt flashed through Wilbur like a burn. But before he could actually think about the fact that he felt guilty for saying that to Rambo, there was another voice echoing in the corridor. Wilbur! Wilbur jolted at the foreign anger in Amesy's voice as they stormed down the hall, their face twisted into a scowl and the flowers on their cheeks bristling. Rambo immediately stepped back so he was closer to them, and they moved in front of him, acting like a shield despite barely being half his height. Amesy, this isn't your fight, Wilbur warned them. Actually, this is my fight, Wilbur. When one of my friends decides to be a dick to my other friend for no good reason, that makes it my fight. That makes it my fight, they snapped, narrowing their eyes at him. Ever since you got here, you've been nothing but rude to Rambo. Why is that? Clenching his jaw, Wilbur met Amesy's dark gaze and tried not to flinch. Because I don't trust him or his intentions with befriending Tommy. Amesy considered this for a moment, so that although their frown didn't listen. Did he do anything to earn this distrust? Amesy, you're not a fucking therapist, so please stop. I asked a question, Wilbur. Did Rambo do anything to earn your distrust? Heart pounding, Wilbur fought to take a measured breath through his nose. No, but he didn't do anything to earn my trust either. At this, something in Amesy's face softened. Did you ever give him a chance to? Wilbur could tell what Amesy was trying to do. They had always been the one to resolve fights among others. They were a peacekeeper. They hated fighting and always encouraged those involved to talk things out and figure out where the root of the problem was. Except right now, Wilbur knew the root of his problem, and it wasn't anything a simple conversation could fix. I can't afford to give chances like that, because the last time I trusted someone, they tried to have me killed! Amesy flinched at Wilbur's shout, as did Rambo, who was still cowering behind them. A beat of silence passed. Wilbur's pounding heart only grew louder in his ears, and the icy panic began to wrap around his limbs once again. Will, Amesy said after a moment, their voice much gentler than before. I get that you were betrayed once, and it was really fucking awful. But you have to trust people again eventually. Just because one person took advantage of that doesn't mean everyone else will. Saltwater was filling his lungs as he fought to breathe. You're wrong, he choked out. Everyone will fuck you over eventually. Even your own brother. Then, before Amesy could ask what he meant, Wilbur was storming down the hallway with Jack right at his heels. His head was spinning and the waves were drowning him now. So he grabbed Jack's wrist and gave him a silent, pleading look. Get me out of here. Without needing to be told this time, Jack began to lead Wilbur down the hall and back to the staircase they were originally going towards. Wilbur barely registered the sound of his own steps, so caught up in his own thoughts of Tommy and Rambo and Amesy and how this was all wrong. This wasn't how things were supposed to be. Oh, it's a little further now that... there we go. Oh, wait, wrong. There we go. Up the stairs, down the hall, and into the small room. Jack led Wilbur up the spiral staircase leading to the trapdoor without a single word passing between them. Wilbur followed, fighting to catch his breath until the trapdoor opened, and he was blasted in the face with frigid air. Goosebumps rose along his arms as he climbed out onto the landing. the icy wind cutting straight through his frenzied thoughts and forcing him out of his own head for just a moment. Jack shut the trapdoor behind them, and as soon as it was closed, Wilbur fell to his knees and twisted his fingers into his hair. "Fuck!" he shouted, his voice instantly carried away by the howling wind. He felt more than heard Jack kneel down behind him. "Just breathe, mate. You look like you're gonna fucking pass out." Wilbur fought to take in a full breath, the icy air stabbing into his lungs. The pain yanked him out of his head for just a moment, and he sucked in another gulp of air, wincing at how it felt like swallowing knives. Tommy betrayed him. The realization settled in his gut like a rock. His own brother, the boy he had practically raised since he was a toddler, had gone behind his back to continue the negotiations without him. What had been the final straw? Was it recent, with Wilbur refusing to tell Tommy why he'd gotten drunk with Quackity? Or was it something further back? Rambu had told Wilbur that Tommy thought he didn't trust him anymore, and Wilbur hadn't done anything to fix that, because it had been true. Wilbur stopped trusting Tommy at some point, and he knew he didn't have it in him to lie to his little brother's face about it. So he just avoided it, hoping things would even out with time. Maybe that was where his mistake had been. Or maybe this had always been maybe this had always been an inevitability. Maybe this path was laid out for the both of them the second they set foot on this planet. That the two would be pulled apart until they were little more than familiar faces to each other. Maybe Wilbur had always been destined to fail. Suddenly, Phil's voice echoed in his head. "Then that's just who you are. That's all you will ever be. There's no changing the person you are, and there's no making room for yourself in a new role. Is that what you want me to say, little bird?" That's not what Wilbur had wanted to hear. He wanted to change. He wanted to be something more than the role that was given to him. So maybe thinking that he was destined to fail was stupid, because the idea of destiny itself was bullshit. But whether or not this was inevitable, that didn't change the fact that this was his reality now. Tommy was considering joining the Empire. The battle Wilbur had been fighting against this entire time was almost lost. "Will?" Jack said after a few minutes of silence, his voice barely audible above the winds. "You feeling a bit better?" "I don't know," Wilbur admitted, not even having noticed that he'd slumped against the wall at some point. There's so much going on in my head right now. It's hard to think straight." Jack nodded, furrowing his brows. "Yeah, I'm sure you're a little freaked out right now." He paused, sitting back against the wall. "You don't have to tell me shit if you don't want to, but if you want to talk about your thoughts or whatever, it might just help to have a sounding board or something." The small voice in the back of Wilbur's head kept screaming at him not to trust anyone. Not Tommy, not Rambu, not Jack. But at the same time, what was the fucking point anymore? Tommy was already considering joining the Empire. That ship had already set sail. Even if Jack was a snitch, which Wilbur at this point was almost certain he wasn't, what would he tell Puffy that could make things worse? "You heard me tell Rambu that Tommy was talking to Technoblade about Elding Vega joining the Empire," Wilbur began, keeping his eyes on the frost-covered stone he was sitting on. "Yeah, I did." Jack confirmed. Swallowing down a lump in his throat, Wilbur nodded. Yeah, well, that's just fucking it, isn't it? This whole time I've been trying to keep us from having to join the Empire, and then Tommy goes and talks to the fucking Imperator himself about joining without even telling me he was going to do it. It just proves to me that he doesn't give a damn about my opinion anymore. Well, did he and Technoblade make any actual decisions about the whole joining thing? Jack asked. Wilbur shrugged. No, nothing formal. But they talked about it, and that's practically a gavel slam right there. Technoblade knows that Tommy is willing to join now, and that tells him and Philza that they just have to keep pushing and he'll agree soon enough. We were already at a huge disadvantage, but Tommy's basically handed them our fucking surrender on a silver platter. A moment passed as Jack considered this. I mean, I know I'm just a guard, and I don't really get all this politics shit like you do. But I don't think this is as cut and dry as you think it is, Jack said, his mismatched eyes focused on the glittering city below. No decisions have been made yet. Yeah, it's not great for negotiations, but I wouldn't say things are over until you actually sign the papers. When another breeze blew over them, a chill ran down Wilbur's spine. Tommy didn't tell me about it, Jack. Didn't even say he was considering bringing it up to Technoblade. He could have signed those fucking papers without me knowing a goddamn thing. The only reason I found out was because Technoblade told me, not him. Sounds like your problem isn't so much with the whole thing about Eldingvega joining the Empire, but more about the fact that Theseus isn't telling you stuff, Jack pointed out. And if that's what's got you so fucked up, then you should probably try talking to him about it. Wilbur scoffed. Wow, no fucking shit. Another beat passed as Jack frowned at him. Shame washed over Wilbur like the wind freezing his blood, and it was only a few seconds before he let out a breath. I'm sorry that was uncalled for, he muttered, pulling his knees close to his chest. This is really fucking me up. Jack's frown faded almost as quickly as it appeared. It's okay. It's okay. I get it. I'd be pretty fucking pissed too if I were in your shoes. And that made something snap inside Wilbur's head. Pissed. The hurt and grief swirling around the waves were not the source of his spinning thoughts. No. The thing that was causing the waves to swell in the first place was, once again, his anger. Wilbur had been dismissed and ignored his entire life by the servants on Eldingvega, by the ambassadors from Themis, and even by the SMP soldiers. I don't like letting bugs fly around my head. It's just distracting. Now Tommy had dismissed him, had deemed it unimportant to tell him this major development in their negotiations. His own brother couldn't tell him up front what he was thinking. Philza had told Wilbur that he was the one who called himself pathetic. And right now, Wilbur knew he was being pathetic again. He was hiding on the roof of the palace instead of confronting his little brother. He didn't want to be pathetic enough to be dismissed anymore. I need to talk to him, Wilbur said suddenly, pushing to his feet and opening the trap door again. Jack's eyes widened. Want me to take you back to your room? Wilbur nodded, the waves roaring in his ears louder than the wind howling around his head. Yes, take me back. By some miracle or another, they didn't run into anyone else on the walk back. When Wilbur opened the door, his fists were clenched and he was expecting to find himself face to face with Tommy, but instead was met with an empty room. According to Puffy, he's in the training room, Jack told him after relaying a message into his earpiece. All right, I'll wait here until he gets back. Nodding, Jack stepped back out of the doorway. I'll be out here if you need anything. With that, the door slid shut, and Wilbur found himself alone for the first time all day. His mind was racing. Anger thawed away the ice in his blood, and he paced around the room, finding himself unable to stay still. He had to wait for his brother to get back, and look into his eyes, knowing that he had betrayed him. A few months ago, Wilbur wouldn't have been able to fathom the idea of Tommy betraying him like this. Then again, a few months ago, his little brother wasn't a stranger to him. He was someone Wilbur knew better than he knew himself, and everything about him made sense. Wilbur! Tommy whined as he entered the sitting room. Where are you? I'm over here, child, Wilbur called back, lifting a hand behind the back of the couch so Tommy could see him. There was a brief pause. Then, footsteps were running towards him, and Wilbur didn't even get a chance to brace himself before Tommy was collapsing on top of the couch, and on top of Wilbur in return. Fuck! Wilbur yelped as the full weight of a 15-year-old boy was dropped on top of him. You almost broke my holodisc! Tommy, who was slumped uncomfortably across Wilbur's chest with his legs hanging off the end of the couch, rolled his eyes. Your fault for taking the couch. Wilbur narrowed his eyes. There's literally a chair right there, he said, pointing to a plush chair only a few feet away from the couch. But I wanted the couch, Tommy protested, dropping more of his weight onto Wilbur as he went completely limp. Huffing, Wilbur shoved Tommy to the side and began to try and roll off the couch. Then I'll take the chair. No! Tommy cut him off, twisting around so he could wrap his arms around Wilbur's chest in what might have looked like a hug to an outsider, but felt closer to a constrictor trying to suffocate him. You can't leave me. I need comfort, Wilbur. Pausing, Wilbur frowned at Tommy. Did something happen? Tommy nodded, his eyes wide. Yes, something really fucking terrible happened. Wilbur's heart skipped a beat. What happened? You're not gonna believe this, big brother of mine, but Foolish said I failed my maths test. Oh, that little shit. The anxiety spike Wilbur had immediately faded as he frowned at his little brother. You scared me, Tommy. I thought it was something serious. It is serious. I'm being given cruel and unusual punishment by my tutor, he whined, burying his face into Wilbur's chest. I think maths is a form of torture, you know. It's fucking useless. When am I ever gonna need to know how to find the length of a goddamn triangle? Rolling his eyes, Wilbur decided to give up trying to escape Tommy's hold, and shifted so they were both sitting up against the couch. It was easier to just accept his fate than try to fight it, especially when Tommy was in a clingy mood. It teaches you problem solving and analytical thinking, Wilbur explained, resting a hand on top of Tommy's hair. I don't know what those things mean, Tommy grumbled, shoving his head into Wilbur's hand. You don't know what problem solving is? Wilbur questioned, raising an eyebrow. Okay, well, obviously I know what that means, Tommy said, but why the fuck do I need to know how to analytically think about shit? So you can be better at solving problems, Wilbur shot back, making Tommy groan. You have to know how to take information you have and apply it to solve real-world issues you're dealing with. Maths might seem useless, but it helps you build those skills in an abstract way. Tommy groaned again. You're an abstract way. Wilbur couldn't stop himself from smiling at Tommy's petty insults. That doesn't even make sense, dumbass. You don't make sense, bitch, Tommy shot back. Huffing out a laugh, Wilbur leaned further into the couch cushions and rested his chin on top of Tommy's head. I do. You're just pissy that you failed maths. You're right, I am, which is why I'm here. So you can complain to me? Wilbur asked. Tommy shook his head. Because you'll make me feel better about it, he admitted, his voice much softer now. Smile fading, Wilbur wrapped his arms around Tommy, pulling him into a proper hug. It's okay, Tommy. You can retake the test. I know, Tommy told him, his voice muffled by Wilbur's shirt. I just feel stupid for failing it in the first place. Sighing, Wilbur pulled away slightly so he could meet Tommy's eyes. You're not stupid. You just need to take some time to study more. But it's okay not to get something the first time. Taking a shaky breath, Tommy nodded. Thanks, Will. Of course, Tommy, Wilbur said, tucking Tommy under his chin again. Wilbur's pillow was being battered on all sides by the waves now, and water was flooding his nose. His legs were sore from pacing the room, and after a while, he resigned himself to sitting on the edge of the bed. He waited, twisting his hands together until they were bright red. He waited, tugging at the loose thread on his coat until he'd unraveled half the bottom hem. He waited, with his heart in his throat and salt water in his lungs. He waited. Eventually, the door opened. Tommy's blonde curls stuck to the sweat on his forehead, his face bright red from exertion. He was shaking out his arms as he stepped into the room, but it was only after the door shut did he notice Wilbur sitting on the bed. Oh, you're here, Tommy said, giving Wilbur a once-over before turning to head to the bathroom. Wilbur had frozen when Tommy entered the room, but then he stiffened, climbing off the bed into his feet before Tommy could even take one step away from him. Tommy, we need to talk. A visible jolt shot through Tommy at that. He paused mid-step, glancing over his shoulder at Wilbur with furrowed brows. About what? He asked, looking genuinely confused. Because if it can wait, I really want to take a shower first. It can't wait. Wilbur cut him off, surprised at the anger seething under his own words. Tommy seemed to notice it too, because something inside of him shifted. He blinked once, before straightening his shoulders and clenched his jaw, turning back to face Wilbur. Fine. What's going on? Impatience bled through his tone, along with a thread of annoyance that set Wilbur's nerves on edge. How dare he act like he's the one inconvenienced by this? Like Wilbur's causing a problem for him right now. But how did Wilbur start this? He could barely hear himself think over the roaring in his ears now, let alone string together a sentence about everything that was going on inside of him. A part of Wilbur didn't want to ask, because if he asked Tommy and he confirmed what Technoblade said, then that made it real. That meant his little brother really and truly betrayed him. But if he kept quiet, Wilbur could tell himself it was just Technoblade making it up. It would be ignorance, but sometimes ignorance was better than reality. Except Wilbur knew the question would torment him endlessly until he got an answer. There was no peace in ignorance for him. Not anymore. Wilbur was silent as he thought this over. Meanwhile, Tommy frowned. Are you gonna get on with it or what? He snapped. Shit. Guess he just had to rip the band-aid off. I spoke with Technoblade today. And just like that, Tommy's annoyance disappeared. His eyes went wide, and a horrible, painful weight settled deep inside Wilbur's gut because he knew what that look meant. That was the face Tommy made when he'd been caught doing something he wasn't supposed to be doing. Wilbur had seen it hundreds of times over the years. When he got scolded for a prank, or was found stealing cookies from the kitchen. That wide-eyed look always filled his entire face. Now, those wide, pale eyes were staring right into Wilbur's own, and they were full of fear. You did? Tommy stammered, clearly forcing himself to sound casual. What did you guys talk about? Wilbur clenched his jaw. I think you know what I'm going to say, he said flatly. A beat passed, and then another. Silence wrapped around them both, tying a string around Wilbur's throat and threatening to choke him if something didn't snap it in half. Then, it was just a talk, Tommy told him, his words now holding a razor-sharp edge to them that hadn't been there before. Nothing was made official. We were just talking about possibilities. You mean the possibility of Eldingberger joining the Empire? Wilbur stated, curling his hands into fists at his sides. You spoke with Technoblade about us joining, and you didn't even have the fucking balls to tell me yourself. I had to hear it from him. If there had been ice between them before, then Wilbur definitely just heard another crack appear inside it. No decisions were made. We were just talking about it. Tommy snapped, the fear disappearing from his eyes as icy flames took its place. It doesn't fucking matter if you didn't make any formal decisions. You told him you were willing to consider joining the Empire, and that's as good as signing the goddamn surrender papers right then and there! Wilbur snapped back, his voice booming over the room. Tommy's face twisted into a scowl. Well, I hate to be the one to say it, but you need to wake the fuck up, Wilbur, Tommy hissed. We've run out of options. Either we join the Empire, or we lose Eldingberger entirely. What would you rather do? A wave of anger rose up inside of Wilbur, the water melting away the last of the ice inside of him. We were going to make a compromise, Tommy! Wilbur exclaimed, gesturing wildly into the air. That's the whole fucking point of negotiations! Philza and Technoblade want us to join the Empire. We don't want to join the Empire. We work out an in-between that works for everyone. Did you forget that was our entire goddamn plan? Tommy's scowl deepened. No, I didn't forget. I realized that the plan was never gonna work. Philza and Techno can just take the entire damn planet if they want. We literally don't have another choice here. Don't you get it? It's called political strategy, asshole. You didn't know any damn political strategy before we got here. Who taught you that? Technoblade? Wilbur taunted, raising his eyebrows at Tommy. You're such a fucking dick sometimes, do you know that? Tommy asked instead of responding to the jab. You treat me like I'm an idiot who can't think for myself at all. I do not! Wilbur protested. I never said you were an idiot, but right now you're certainly being one because you're letting Technoblade put ideas into your head. Oh, you fucking... Tommy cut himself off, taking a deep breath like he was struggling to stay calm. I'm not fucking stupid like that. I know Techno wants us to join the Empire. I get it. But I haven't been only talking to him. "Ah yes, Rambo," Wilbur said, his words dripping with sarcasm as he nodded at Tommy. "Perfect impartial party right there." "I was talking about you, dickhead," Tommy hissed. Wilbur rolled his eyes. "It's kind of hard to give you advice when you don't tell me shit, Tommy." "You know, that's a fair point. Feels pretty shitty for someone you trust not to tell you stuff, doesn't it?" "Shit. I told you, nothing I talked about with Philza was relevant. And I'm just supposed to believe that?" Tommy snapped, cutting him off. "You haven't been acting like yourself for months now. You go off and talk with the fucking Emperor of the Antarctic... Fuck, hold on. You go off and talk with the fucking Emperor of the Antarctic Empire every day. You gave Jack permission to call you by your personal name. And you even went and got drunk with the asshole that punched you in the face. But you keep telling me we can't trust anyone here. Just because I'm talking to people doesn't mean I trust them." Wilbur shot back. "We can't trust any of them, Tommy. No matter how friendly or genuine they seem. Especially not Technoblade or Philza." "Why not, though?" Tommy challenged, eyes blazing with anger. "I know you say we can't trust Philza and Technoblade to let us keep majority control of Eldigvega like they say they will, but even the other leaders at the summit kept telling us that being under Empire rule wasn't that bad. For fuck's sake, they wanted us to join the Empire too because that meant they'd get discounted Blazophane," Wilbur argued, dragging his hands through his hair. "That could be it, yeah. Or maybe some of them were being genuine. Maybe you need to stop thinking the worst of every single damn person you talk to." Wilbur glared at his brother. How could he be this blind? "Tommy, do I need to remind you what happened the last time we trusted someone?" Wilbur hissed, narrowing his eyes. "Do I need to remind you that Era took our trust and used it to try and get us killed?" "Of course I haven't forgotten," Tommy forced out between gritted teeth. "But that's one person who betrayed us. One. Really? Just one?" Wilbur fixed Tommy with a dark glare. "And what about Tubbo?" At his words, Tommy flinched like he'd been slapped. It was a low blow. Wilbur knew that. But he had to make Tommy understand that the people they knew here in the Antarctic Empire weren't their friends. Technoblade didn't actually give a shit. Neither did Philza, or Rambu, or Puffy. They didn't care. Tubbo didn't want to do it. Eric forced him, Tommy said, the blue flames burning brighter in his eyes than Wilbur had ever seen before. "We don't know that for sure," Wilbur shot back. Tommy glared at him for another moment, taking stuttered breaths through his nose. Even if Technoblade and Philza are lying, and they're not going to give us any control of Eldigvega when they take it, which couldn't make sense, because why wouldn't they have just fucking taken it already then? We don't have another choice, Wilbur. Wilbur couldn't breathe. His thoughts were crashing down on one another. The seafoam was sizzling in his ears and his blood was like electric as it pumped through his veins. He couldn't breathe and everything was just too much right now. Far too much. "We can't join the Antarctic Empire!" Wilbur exclaimed, his self-control quickly slipping. "And you're a fucking idiot if you think that we can and it'll be fine, because it won't!" "Why?" Tommy demanded, storming across the room until he was right in Wilbur's face. Why are you being such a stubborn prick right now that you won't even consider it when it's our only fucking choice?" His jaw was beginning to ache from how hard he was biting down. "Because I'm trying to keep our planet safe!" Wilbur shouted, his voice echoing off the walls. Tommy flinched away at the shouting, stumbling back from Wilbur with a kind of rage on his face that Wilbur had never seen anything close to before. He stared at Wilbur for a long moment. His chest was heaving, and the flames in his eyes were sparking. Even from several feet away, Wilbur could practically feel himself getting burnt. Then... mine. Wilbur blinked. What? It's not our planet. It's my planet. Tommy said, his eyes suddenly ice cold as the flames were snuffed out. A beat passed. Wilbur didn't understand what Tommy was saying. What are you talking about? Wilbur asked, his voice having fallen back to a normal volume. Tommy took one step back towards Wilbur. In case you forgot, I'm the heir to the throne of Eldingvega. It's my planet, and you have no right to tell me what to do with it. The waves were slamming into every side of him now. What are you saying? I grew up on Eldingvega too, Wilbur argued, although his voice was strangled. Might have grown up there, but the right to rule Eldingvega is in my blood. And you? Tommy took another step towards him, and Wilbur stumbled back as his little brother leaned in so close he could feel Tommy's breath on his face. You're just a fucking bastard. At that moment, the world slowed down for Wilbur. A wave more powerful than any other before it crashed into Wilbur with the force of a train. Pain radiated through his chest, and Wilbur gasped because he felt it crack. The last piece of his pillar broke off, and Wilbur could only watch as it fell beneath the waves. Salt water burned his lungs and his eyes. He blinked and found himself staring at a boy who once had been his brother, but felt like a complete stranger to him now. Tommy had never cared about the fact that Wilbur was a bastard. It was never something they brought up. Sure, others taunted him with it, but Wilbur had always been reassured by one constant throughout his life. That Tommy was his, and he was Tommy's. Half-brothers, but brothers all the same. But now that wasn't true. Wilbur found nothing but ice sitting behind Tommy's eyes as he struggled to take in breath after breath. It hurt. It hurt more than anything Wilbur had ever felt before. There was a bloody hole where his heart should be. And Tommy, his Tommy, didn't seem to care one bit. The water was covering his head. Everything was burning, and in the jagged ruins of his own mind, Wilbur felt the waves swelling once again. And this time, he latched onto it. He let the anger build, because there was nothing to be afraid of anymore. He was already drowning, so why not dive head first into it? Tommy's words had landed right where he wanted them to. But Wilbur knew Tommy better than anyone else. And if he wanted to play this game, then Wilbur knew exactly what to say next. It was physically painful straightening his shoulders and moving around Tommy. Clenching his jaw so hard, he was convinced he was going to crack a tooth in another minute or two. Blood welled up in his palms when he was digging his nails into them, and he listened to it drip onto the floor as he backed up towards the door. What are you doing? Tommy asked once Wilbur was at the door, some of the coldness having faded from his eyes. If I'm just a bastard, then I shouldn't be sharing a room with royalty, Wilbur said, the cool tone of formal court speaking slipping into his words without him even needing to try. Tommy frowned. Wait. His protests died on his tongue when Wilbur bowed, as deeply as he could go to make the knife plunge deeper. Years of etiquette training were the only thing that kept him standing at that moment, because otherwise, he'd collapse on the floor right then and there. My apologies, Prince Theseus, Wilbur continued, his face blank and voice cold as he locked eyes with his little brother. I'll be taking my leave now. Horror washed over Tommy's face when he heard Wilbur say his formal name. But before he could say anything else, Wilbur was opening the door and didn't look back as he walked out of the room with perfectly straight shoulders and a gaping hole in his chest. God fucking damn it. What the fuck? Emotional Hold on. Fun fact, I've had the I'm trying to keep our planet safe, mine what my planet not ours dialogue exchange planned out since I wrote chapter 6 of this fic. I've been holding on to that for a long time and it felt so good to write. Oh, I bet it did. Fuck you! But at the same time, great writing. God. Feel free to scream. They seriously make my day. Hold on, I want to read the comments. I didn't think this would happen. I didn't think they'd be drifting apart, and now I'm sad. Jesus Christ. Alright. Ooh, those are good cracks. Alrighty. I think that is going to be my stream. That chapter went by a lot faster than I thought it would. I don't know if that's just me. Let's see. Who shall we raid? Let's read. Is that how you spell it? Yeah. Makanari's playing Sims 4, so this should be fun. Alright. Thank y'all so much for watching. It's really fun reading the stars and their children, and God, things are whoo! Alright. You could probably tell just how exhausted I am from the fact that I can't really speak that much. Alrighty. I hope you guys have a great rest of your night, and I will see y'all next time. Bye-bye!